at the end of the session, I do show you what the actual project might look like. But for now, I just wanted to share with you a little bit of a taster. So I will share my screen for you now. So when we're thinking about music and when we're thinking about performance in particular, there are so many things that make up what a performance is. So it's not just about how you sound on stage. It takes a lot of things working up to that to enable us to be there on stage in the first place. So one thing that I think is really important to look at is image persona, okay? So your image and your persona is how you want to look and be perceived on stage. So you can watch many different varieties of performances. Let's take, for example, an opera performance. Let's take, for example, a symphony orchestra performing. And then let's look at another performer that's been really in the media at the moment because of their tour. Let's think about Taylor Swift. Okay, all of these people have very different ways of engaging on stage and different ways of how they not only look, but also behave on stage. So it'd be really odd, for example, to see a symphony orchestra behave in the same way as Taylor Swift on stage. There's not going to be very much movement from an orchestra for many reasons. But it's because you perform and your image and persona reflects the style or genre of music that it is that you're creating for the audience. So image and persona is something that over the course of a project like this, we'd spend a little time looking at, and you'd spend a bit of time analysing performers that you enjoy yourself, but also performers that I might suggest to you to just help you with your creative thinking about what a performance looks like, what a good performance looks like. So under image and persona, we have dress, okay? We have the way that you might or might not move on stage, but we also have some really important things. So your engagement with the audience, and have a think about now for a second, how do I engage with my audience on stage? That could be anything from a smile, a head nod, getting the audience to clap along with you, okay? And all of those things are what we call non-verbal communication, okay? So non-verbal communication is things like eye contact, smiling, swaying to the music. You're engaging with your audience and saying, this is how I feel, please respond, okay? That's what non-verbal communication is. But we also have verbal communication where you might say, hi, I'm Miss Lewis, I'm going to be performing for you today on the cello, and you might have a verbal communication with your audience. Obviously, if you're singing, that is another part of that verbal communication. As well as that, you will also maybe, if you have people working on stage with you, have verbal or non-verbal communication with them. So you might nod to the drummer, okay? You might click your sticks if you're playing the drums to get people in time, ready to start. All of those things are non-verbal communication. But then you might also verbally introduce somebody on stage. This is John on the drums, for example. So that is a massively important part of performance. But then leading up to that final performance, we also have these two other elements here. So our rehearsal skills. What was the process we went through? We don't just learn a song and appear on stage and perform well. So throughout this course, and a unit like this, for example, we would spend a few lessons rehearsing our piece. And that's to make sure that we're performing accurately, that we know the lyrics if there are lyrics, that we're aware of how we perform, okay, that song, whether it be projection, whether it be use of light and shade in dynamics. So our rehearsal at the start will be very much based on our instrument, whether that be voice or an instrument itself. And we might break down a piece of music, learn it in little chunks, for example, one section at a time or a chorus at a time, and then gradually build that up until we fully know our piece. But then after that point, when we're confident with our piece, what we will start to do is learn how to perform on stage, and we will rehearse how to perform on stage. So we might think about how we stand on stage. We might film ourselves performing, even though it's just at home. We might film ourselves to see what our habits are. Are we playing with our hair? Are we holding the microphone in a correct way? Are our audience able to see us when we hold our instrument? Are we better standing up or sitting down? So all of these things we'll start to look at through the latter part of our rehearsal. And if this was to be a real topic that we were studying at the moment, this would be a really long process, probably over a good 8 weeks, maybe even slightly longer, where we'll start to look at and track our rehearsals from start to finish until we have that final product that is ready for performance. As well as that, we'll consider our development of skills. So throughout our performance, throughout our musical careers, we want to develop as artists, whether that be as composers, music technicians, whatever area of the industry it is that we want to go into. For this project in particular, we're focusing on being a performer. How can we develop our skills? And that's where all the boring bits come in. So the warming up on our instruments, the bits that we don't enjoy doing, but actually are so good for us and are absolutely what we should be doing. And that's where we develop our technique, our dexterity, our stamina on our instrument. And that's when, at that point, when we continue to develop our skills, and that will happen throughout our musical careers, that is when we will start to up our level of challenge in our pieces, where we might pick a more difficult piece of music to perform. So that is our first little intrigue that we're going to start thinking about for ourselves. What is performance? What is the difference between playing a piece of music and performing a piece of music? And that's when we're going to start to unpick what our own skill sets are. What do you think of yourself as a performer? How would you describe your performance skills? So that's the little first part I wanted to have a little look at. And this would be explored over a series of sessions in lots of different workshops together. So in order for us to gauge a sort of understanding of what a good one looks like effectively, we would be analysing music all the time collectively as a group. So when we meet for our lessons, that's going to become a regular part. And I'll quite often ask you to bring pieces that we can analyse together. Now, I've chosen this piece of music. And in case you can't access it on here, it's Leave the Door Open by Bruno Mars. I'm not going to play it for you now because I want you to go away, if you want to take part in this session, I want you to go away and listen to it yourselves in your own time. But I want you to consider these questions at the side. What makes this performance a success? What have the artists considered when creating their performance? And I just want you to list down some of those ideas. If you pause me now, you'll be able to do that little workshop yourself and have a little listen. Come back and I'll share some of my ideas. So hopefully you had a little listen to that. And I'll just justify a little bit why I chose that song. I'm sure you can already imagine. They have thought about so many things. So what we were saying in our previous slide there, when we were talking about this rehearsal process from start to finish, that we begin learning the piece, we then master that piece, we then move on to consider ourselves as performers. You can see that whole range of activities that they have done in order to create this final product here. So we're looking here, if we go back to that previous slide again and look at that image and persona, they've really thought about not only what they wear, their sunglasses, for example, but they've really thought about how they want to come across on stage. They've gone for like a 70s-y kind of vibe here. On top of that, they've really thought about their microphone technique. Okay, we've got both artists just in this still that you can see here with their eyes closed, holding that microphone. Now, as you go through and watch that, you'll see that their movement on stage, they've obviously clearly rehearsed where and when to move and how they can sync that together in order to create a really effective performance for their audience. Okay, as well as that, if we break down the sound now, we've got really talented vocalists here with a really wide range. Okay, they're using harmony. That's when we've got two different layers of melody working together at the same time. Now, they've also thought about their projection here. They've thought about their ad-libs, so their improvisation throughout that. And they're really thinking of how they communicate that across to their audience, which all in all makes it a really successful and engaging performance to watch. So hopefully you've got some of those ideas too, and hopefully you enjoyed that little bit of music there. But I will move on. Now, there is so much to think about when we think about music, when we think about performance. And I've listed all of the things that is probably going through your brain now, or that you might not have even thought about, and that's absolutely fine. But when we're breaking down a performance collectively, when we start working together in September, all of these things will be things that we explore before you get this project. So that will be, what will you wear? What personality traits will you show? How will you consider your use of image to be when you're being filmed, for example? How would you describe your stage presence, your verbal and non-verbal communication? Are you smiling when you perform? Are you introducing yourself as an artist? What genre or genres of music do you enjoy performing? What instrument would you like to play? What about your accuracy of playing in terms of pitch, timing, reading music? What is your instrumental skill level? What is your technique like? What is your stamina like on your instrument? All of these things, including lighting and sound, are you going to have a backdrop? Are you going to be performing with lighting? Is there anyone else that you're going to need to communicate with? So all of these things are so important when we create a piece of music, but then you can't think of them all at once. So as I said, over the course of a few weeks, we would explore these things together so that you've got a really clear journey of what your final product will look like. Okay, altogether it's too much to think about, but in order to create a performance like we saw on the previous slide, there are things that are massively important. So that's just an idea of the kind of thing that you'd have to think about throughout the course of a unit together, but that's something that I'd guide you through and that we do lessons on. In order for you to explore what it is you want to produce as your final point rather than your starting point. Now, one thing that we look at quite a lot during performance is this idea of a skills audit. And a skills audit allows us to go through and break down all of the fundamental skills that we need to be a performer, okay? Some of them are not relevant to you if you play a certain instrument. So, for example, pitch isn't relevant if you play a drum, for example, or if you're a drummer. But generally speaking, these things are things that are massively important for you to have a solid sounding piece. And what I'm going to ask you to do is go through, if you wish to take part in the taster, and just first of all, if you're not sure of the meaning of the words, have a little Google. RSL really promotes this idea of independence. Find a dictionary, find a music dictionary, or Google. BBC Bite Size is a great place to start, for example. But Google these words. I'll give you one little tip though. When you're Googling, for example, accuracy of phrasing, make sure you Google accuracy of phrasing in music. That will just make sure that the things that you find are relevant to what it is that you're studying. But that's the first thing I'd like you to do. Make a little keywords document if you wish, that just gives you the justification of what these words mean. But what you're going to do after that is you're going to rate your successes in each of those things. So, for example, accuracy of pitch and intonation. So that is, am I able, just as a small little example, am I able to sing in tune? And I might say, number 1 being I'm not very confident, number 5 being I think I'm an expert at this, or I'm becoming an expert at this if you wish, and rate your successes of that. What you're then going to do is justify that. So, for example, I might rate my pitch at a 4. And my justification will be, I've sang a few performances in front of an audience and I've had really great feedback. I've also listened to myself perform and audio recorded myself perform. And I believe that my pitch is mostly accurate. Okay, that's the only kind of thing we're going to want in there. And you'll do that for each and every single one of the things on the list here. Okay, and you'll rate yourself, and over time you should, over the course of a unit, so for example, if this was us studying together in September, we'd do this at the beginning of the unit and then at the end. They obviously change and adapt depending on what the unit is that we're studying, but you'll see that progression of how you've improved through your focused and structured rehearsal from the beginning of the process right until the end. So if you would like to, you're more than welcome to complete that and fill that in for me. That would be lovely, but please don't, as I say, don't feel like you have to. But then after after that, from that information that we receive here, it should allow us, when we're looking at our ones and twos, to think, okay, I've got a couple of areas here I think that I could do with improving. And I might then set those as goals. So, for example, it could be that my expression and dynamics, so that means our loudness, our ability to communicate what the lyrics are to the audience. Let's just say that that's something that I'm getting ones and twos on here. So I think, right, okay, I'm going to set that as an achievable and measurable goal. And I might set myself a target, for example, to perform a song with lyrics that I can connect to and to use projection in my chorus. Okay, and that gives me a really clear and structured goal. I'm going to first of all think about the lyrics because I want to add expression to whatever it is that I'm choosing to do. But then I'm also going to think about how I'm projecting using dynamics to create real big light and shade in my music performance. Okay. So you can then use your skills audit here in order to create 2 goals. I've added a little document here that's a good read if you're struggling with setting goals for yourself. But your goals realistically should be things that are measurable and that are achievable. And that's what we're looking for there. Okay, so these are the first couple of things that I thought I'd give you as a little treat. To show you overall what a task might look like, it would asks are always in vocational form. So what that means is that we give you a scenario. So for example, you have been commissioned to perform a song linked to the theme of resilience. You may compose your song yourself or perform a cover of a song you already know. This performance will be entered into a local music charity competition. Okay, so it's giving you a real life scenario. Now, I'm not going to enter you into a competition, don't worry, and you haven't been commissioned, so please don't panic. It is just a scenario that you will always get throughout RSL. They like to give it a context so that you feel like, okay, this is something that could happen in the real world. So that's the justification as to why it looks like that. Now, this is asking you to create a song or to perform a song that you already know. So it will be by an artist that you enjoy, any style of music, any instrument you wish, and it will be linked to the theme of resilience. Now, that might feel really tricky and overwhelming initially, but please don't worry about the theme. Now, we can link almost any song or piece of music that you wish to any theme that RSL give us. Okay, and the reason why we're able to do that is because music is so personal. So I'll give you a really silly example, but hopefully it will help you realize how easy it is to adapt things. So let's take the song, for example, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Now, I wouldn't expect you to perform this in your performance. However, let's just say that this is the piece that I would like to perform, just to show you how I'm going to link that to resilience. Now, I might take some of the lyrics of that song. So like a diamond in the sky, I might think, well, stars are there all the time. They're really resilient. Come rain or shine, they are always there. You might not see them. Okay, there's my justification. That is enough for the exam board. Okay, I might also think about the melody and say, well, to me, the melody sounds really resilient. Okay, it goes high, it goes low, it uses repetition. Okay, that to me shows resilience. Okay, so these are little subtle ways that you will justify your piece of music. I've used a really silly example just to try and show you, but please don't stress or worry too much about how your piece will link, because we will always find a link. It's about you choosing a song that you are passionate about and that you want to perform. So please don't think too much about the theme. That is something we will work on together throughout the whole unit. So there's a short example of what the performance task might look like on your assignment brief. But then there's all the other bits that we have to include in this project as well. So those are things we've had a look at just a couple of slides ago, where we looked at, your skills audit and your targets. So the second paragraph here is saying to accompany this, you must complete your skills audit, which is that, with your justifications and your goals. You will then set the 2 goals for yourself to achieve during the rehearsal process, as well as an evaluation at the end of the project. You'll be assessed on the following things: your ability to perform a song fit for the brief, your ability to perform with confidence in a live setting, and finally, your ability to assess your ability and techniques, as well as to evaluate your final performance and progress. So what you'll have to do in the end is this thing here, a little evaluation, where you will look at how you have improved on your skills audit, how you have set your targets and how you feel you've achieved them, as well as the rehearsal process itself, what you found challenging, what you could do differently next time, and how you would describe your overall performance. Okay. So there is for you a little taster of the kind of project that you might undertake in RSL. Okay.